Hello and welcome to Gundyr's Battle Arena. Dark Souls is my favorite game, and I've been looking for new ways to play it, so I created a challenge called the Enemy Boss Rush. Basically, I've set up my game so that I can play through it fighting each boss as an actual enemy of my choosing. I'm actually playing as these enemies using a mod, and today we'll be using Gundyr to try and defeat every required boss in the game. Emphasis on the word required. That means no Midir, Gale, Frida, or Nameless King to name a few. Everything is in the description, but the rules of this challenge are simple. Rule number 1, I must fight and defeat every required boss in the game while playing as the enemy I've chosen. I must also be the one to land the final hit on each boss, and this is to discourage overly relying on my teammates, which brings me to rule number 2. I am allowed to use phantoms, but only those who can normally be summoned to help out with that fight, and only when absolutely necessary. Finally, the game must be played on max new game difficulty, new game plus 7. On this difficulty, every enemy's health, damage, and even their individual stamina values all increase. This challenge is going to be very difficult. The main reason why is because of the fact that I cannot roll and therefore have no access to any invincibility frames. I also can't heal during the fight, so there will be no Sunny D for me. Lastly, I'm forced to use tank controls while I'm piloting each enemy, and if you're unfamiliar, that basically means that you can only move in the direction that you're facing, which makes our mobility even worse. Now, normally I would start with fighting Gundyr, obviously, since that is the first boss, but I already did that last week, so I'm going to refer you to that video instead. In this video, we'll be starting with Vordt, but before that, let's get into our moveset and stats so that we can understand what tools we have at our disposal. For starters, we have flat damage reductions against all physical, magic, fire, and lightning type damage. I know that sounds impressive, but it really isn't, since most enemies in the game also share these same bonuses. What we really care about is our HP and absorption, aka our percentage-based damage reduction. On your first playthrough, Gundyr has 1037 HP. At New Game Plus 7 though, he caps out at 4985, which is serviceable for what we're doing. As far as our absorption goes, we take the most damage from lightning, fire, magic, and thrust type damage. We're also weak to frost, which means our first fight against Vordt won't be easy. To round out our defenses, we're very resistant to dark type damage and bleed, likely because we're technically an abyssal enemy given the corruption that's kind of bubbling on our back. Speaking of corruption, while playing as Gundyr, unfortunately I cannot transform, which might actually be a blessing in disguise given the fact that the transformation animation takes so long and leaves us vulnerable during it. We're also susceptible to poise breaks, so if we take too much damage in a short period of time, Gundyr will kneel and we're basically screwed. The good news is we actually have a pretty good range on our moves, even if they are a little slow, and they do pretty good damage. We can also jump to quickly close the distance between us and a boss. Unfortunately, we do not have access to any of Gundyr's sick combos. We do one attack and then we can do another. Lastly, as far as mobility goes, we run pretty fast, so that's good. Let's jump into the first fight. Versus Vordt, my plan was simple. Get some quick damage off with Gundyr's jump, and then hug his left side, hitting him whenever he missed an attack or something. But Gundyr's jump does peanuts, and it has so much lag on it that I decide to run back and start circling. It's not working though, and he poise breaks me and the fight is over just as quickly as it started. This moment right here, this is when I realized how difficult this challenge was going to be. For the next few fights, I decided to be a little more aggressive. I still hadn't quite learned my lesson with the jumping attack, but ultimately, the goal here was to just stay close and try to trade with Vordt as much as I could. You can see how well that worked out for me. Many attempts later, and I started experimenting with the lunge, which hits really hard, but it's kind of difficult to aim. After this death, it became apparent that staying close was just not gonna work. I tried really hard to win this fight, and after about 30 attempts, I realized something. I couldn't win. I had to throw in the towel, and our Gundyr only run was over before it even began.
Mission failed. We'll get him next time.
Or was it? Looking back at the rule set, I said that I had to defeat each boss as the enemy I've chosen, and that enemy was Gundyr. Well, in this game, there are 2 Gundyrs, so I upgraded. It was time to become unstoppable. The only thing you really need to know about Champion Gundyr is that when piloting him, his moves are literally identical to the corrupted Gundyr's. The only notable differences are that the corruption on his back goes away and his defenses change. We lose our immunities to poison and toxic, lose our resistance to dark, but gain resistances to slash, fire, and magic type damage. We also become slightly more resistant to frost, but the biggest thing is the buff we get to our health and damage. Our HP almost doubles, going from 4,985 to 8,771. Now that we have the power and health we needed to win, Vordt became a joke. Just kidding. He still killed me 2 more times before I finally won. With Vordt defeated, it was time to set our eyes on the Crystal Sage. With our newfound resistance to magic, this was going to be a breeze. I'm gonna be honest though, it had been a while since I fought this boss, but I knew the odds were in our favor since the Crystal Sage is very weak to physical type attacks, sporting a mere negative 20% absorption to the type. And this is really good for us since that's the only kind of damage we're capable of doing. So, in our first attempt, we're off to a good start. I missed the lunge and just start spamming this attack. I haven't mentioned it until now, but this attack right here, is an S tier attack, at least in my opinion. It hits hard, wraps around Gundyr, and it's one of his faster moves. After hitting him a few times, he teleports, and I just blindly swing at the closest sage to me and completely miss. Get used to that happening, by the way, because in this run, that attack rarely lands. After taking a ton of damage, I managed to locate the real one, surviving with a sliver of HP as I take a soul spear to the back as a parting gift. When the Crystal Sage returns, I decide to go out in style by jumping at what I quickly discover to be a clone. Good thing that was a warm-up. We try again, and this time I land the lunging attack, and you can see why I go for it. That did a lot of damage. After this, we go for my favorite attack, which does almost the same amount. This move, I'm telling you, it's busted. He teleports away at about half HP, and it's time to play some whack-a-mole. I swing, and I miss, again. And I try running through this doorway for cover, but Gundyr is just a little too tall. After expertly dodging a soul spear, I swing, and yeah, another miss. But that's okay though, because we managed to land the OP attack. Now we need just a few more hits and we're looking nice and healthy. Well, we were. I go for a quick attack here because I'm afraid he'll teleport away, and then, yep, another miss. At this point, we're just gonna need a miracle. A miracle that never came. After this attempt, I remembered something. The clones have differently colored magic from the original. Their attacks are blue, but the originals are purple. With my newfound knowledge, a few attempts later, I had this fight down to a science. No more missing lunges. The new plan was to connect the lunge and start spamming our busted move. Genius, I know. For some reason in this attempt, the Sage doesn't teleport away at the halfway mark, and I managed to get him down to 25% of his max HP. Things are looking really good. I take cover behind a pillar, locate the real one, and somehow miss a lunge. At this point, my HP melts away, and I'm losing it. I just need one more attack to win. Once they appear, I decide to gamble and swing at the closest one to me before they can start attacking. After realizing that it's a clone, I locate the real one and miss a lunge. But the OP attack saves me, and I manage to survive with just 265 HP. Insane. Our next opponents were the Abyss Watchers, and this fight was easy peasy lemon squeezy. With our respectable HP and our favorite attack, we could hit multiple in one swing, and there wasn't really much they could do to us in return. So, after destroying these guys and skipping the second phase's cutscene, I went to finish the job and wait, what? So, this was a technical error when I set up the fight. Instead of going through the fog wall, I just kind of warped directly into the room. You need to actually go through the fog wall to trigger the second phase of the fight. So yeah, let's try this again. The second fight went pretty much the same way, but he did poise break me once in his second form. After toying around with him a bit, I decided to end the fight in style. Next were the Deacons. Just like the Abyss Watchers, we were going to be able to hit many of them at once with our huge hitboxes, making this fight another walk in the park. I lunge right into the crowd and start swinging like crazy, accumulating hits of dopamine with each Deacon who falls. I was like a bull in a china shop without a care in the world, causing chaos wherever I turned. Once I came down from my high, I realized, uh-oh, I'm not actually killing the one I need to kill. So I decided to start playing a little smarter by running around and focusing on the one with the red glow. But at this point, my HP is already extremely low, and every time I go in for a hit, the Deacons trade with me. Surely I'm not gonna die to Deacons, right? We're just gonna pretend like that didn't happen.
I'll have 2 number 9s, a number 9 large, a number 6 with extra dip.
I jump back into it, and this time I pull the camera back a little more so you guys can actually see what's going on. The goal is to use our broken attack on the Deacon that's glowing. It's a little tough to aim sometimes, but we end up beating him and it's on to the next one. Wolnir is probably everyone's least favorite fight in the entire game. It's very dark in there, and since we're not playing as the player character who has natural illumination, we can't see a thing. But there's nothing to see here anyway because we just blow up Wolnir's drip and then we're out of there. Pontiff Sulyvahn. Pontiff Sulyvahn is the villain of this run. And in order to understand why, let's watch my first attempt. Pontiff Sulyvahn has 10,887 HP, which is 2,000 more than my own, and he can do fire and thrust type damage, both of which are weaknesses for us. On top of that, his 150 poise means that he isn't staggering from our attacks. If that wasn't bad enough, he can hit us 3 times before I can hit him once, and his mobility is so high that he can just jump behind us to avoid any of our attacks. Our work was definitely cut out for us. Now that I knew what I was up against, I gave it another shot, only this time I would use Gundyr's horizontal slash, which has slightly more range than our favorite attack. I lead with a lunge and it connects, but the follow-up slash misses. No big deal, I'll just go for another, and that one misses too. I create some distance and go for another, but that one also misses. At this point, things are looking pretty bad. I score a lucky hit and go for a close range shoulder tackle before, yeah, he poise breaks me and takes his sweet time preparing what has to be the slowest attack in his arsenal. GG Pontiff, GG. Many attempts later, I decide to invoke rule number 2, which if you'll remember is to summon some phantoms. As it turns out, you can summon Blackhand Gothard and Henri of Astoria to help out with this fight, and so I do. Now that the playing field has been leveled, it was time to get our revenge, so I load up another attempt and rush in head on with my new teammates. I'm feeling pretty confident, not gonna lie, so I go for a jump, and it completely misses. And I'm doing my best to let my team take the aggro since they actually can heal. But I have to be careful though, because if I don't divide the Pontiff's attention equally, then they'll both die. We make it to phase 2, which is really good, but I get greedy and try to capitalize on the Pontiff's transformation sequence. This was a huge mistake, because that explosion hurts. While that was a terrible way to go out, I learned a lot from this attempt. Namely, the best time to attack the Pontiff is during his cloning animation. That last death also made me realize that I really need to stop jumping, at least to attack. In the next attempt, I decide to jump only as a means of escaping. The fight starts, and of course it isn't an attempt if I don't miss my lunge. We somehow manage to corner the Pontiff, and I take this opportunity to dish out some damage. I'm worried that he'll transform soon, so I decide to jump out of the corner, but it looks like he's still just a few hits away from phase 2. I get one quick hit in and then back off, and that's perfect because I narrowly avoid damage from his transformation. I hear him summoning a clone, so I decide to go in and we quickly manage to take it out. I whiff one crucial attack and take a ton of damage for it. I'm kind of scared now, so I'm misspacing some attacks, but I get really lucky and the Pontiff goes for another clone. We quickly kill it, but I see my HP getting low, so I decide to jump out of the corner to be safe. After waiting for the explosion, I go back in for one last attack and the victory is ours. I cannot begin to describe how happy I was to finally beat the Pontiff. This took so many tries, but we finally managed to do it. With this, the challenge was halfway complete, and as I'm sure you're starting to realize, we're reaching the end of this video. I decided to split the challenge into 2 parts since this took so long, but I want to thank you all for watching, and if you're interested in seeing how the second half of it unfolds, go ahead and subscribe so you can be notified when I release the video in the next few days. See you next time.